Hi guys, Carthenian here, and welcome back to our Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 Learn to Fly series. In the last couple of videos, we set up the sim, planned a discovery flight around Cleveland, went over controller mappings, took a look at our airplane on the ground, and taxied over to runway 24 right here. If you missed those videos, you can go back and check them out, and if you want to fly along, just line yourself up here on runway 24 right at Burke Lakefront Airport. All right, I'm going to jump right in, so let me go ahead and set the parking brake, and we'll go ahead and get started here. Let's quickly do a mini before takeoff checklist. Go ahead and turn the nav lights on. This helps others spot us in the sky. Normally you'd have either the nav light or the strobe lights on, but since there's a big placard on the panel about the strobe lights blinding people, I prefer the nav lights in the 152. We're not going to worry about landing lights today. Also not going to worry about carb heat today, just make sure it's pushed in. Verify the trim is in the takeoff range and the mixture is at full rich all the way in. Flap should be at 0. Okay, now a lot of things are going to happen pretty fast here. If you're feeling overwhelmed, as long as you follow the flight plan, you can have the AI take over. To do that, bring up the toolbar and open the AI control. It's the icon that's supposed to look like a pilot's head, I guess, but to me it kind of looks like an acorn. Anyway, once you've done that, you can go ahead and click on Control Aircraft to have the AI take over. If that happens, you may just want to turn on the other two options. Maybe that makes its job easier. I don't know. Depending on where you engage it to, it can start doing some pretty wild stuff. I would suggest you just be brave and fly the plane. I mean, we have crashes off anyway, and even if things get really ugly, you can just restart and try again. If you leave AI control off, forget about the checklist assist for now. We don't need checklists. See, it's going to be fun learning with me. You can turn on the managed radio comms if you want to get some idea about how the simulated ATC will work. So actually, I am going to go ahead and throw on checklist assist for now. Just keep in mind that this can cause some strange behaviors, and the co-pilot sometimes likes to just start pushing buttons and make the plane do stuff you may not want it to do.
Cessna November 629er 4 Whiskey Taxi to and hold short of runway 24 right using taxiway cross runway 6 right Bravo. Contact tower on 124.3 when ready.
Taxi to and hold short runway 24 right via taxiway cross runway 6 right Bravo Cessna 9er 4 Whiskey.
So here we can see that the game popped up these blue ribbons in response to the taxi clearance we just received. It's just trying to show us where to taxi. Okay, so now make a mental note of where your trim buttons are because we're going to be using them when we go to set the cruise. Just if you move the trim to check, make sure it's back in the takeoff neutral range before we take off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and proceed forward and line up with the runway center line. Then we'll give it full throttle and we'll use the rudders to keep the airplane on the center line. Just try not to hit the brakes whatever you do. The airplane's going to want to kind of pull off to the left most likely, so you'll probably have to give it a little bit of right rudder. In the real world, some pilots will put their heels on the floor and push the pedals with their toes to make sure they don't accidentally brake, but a lot of sim setups don't really allow for that. Keep one eye on the airspeed indicator. When it hits 55, gently pull back in the yoke to lift the airplane off the ground and try to keep it level as it accelerates. Once we hit 70, you can pull back more and let the airplane climb as steeply as it takes to keep the airspeed at 70. If it starts getting too slow, like close to 55 again, pitch the airplane down a little bit and let it pick up some speed. We're going to be looking for the Cleveland Brown Stadium here off to our left and then turn around that. Okay, you got all that? Great. Let's spool up and roll out. Take the parking brake off, give it a little juice, and let's get lined up. Don't worry about these arrows. I'll explain what they mean some other time. If you've got too much nose up trim set, you may have to push the yoke in a little to keep the nose down until we hit 55, but if you've got it in takeoff range, this really shouldn't be too much of an issue. Once we accelerate, remember to gently pull back. If you pull back too hard, the airplane is just going to lose speed and fall right back out on the runway. Okay, full power and let's go. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will be a pyramid off to our left. Our Science Museum is just past that, and then we'll have the Brown Stadium.
Cleared for takeoff runway 24 right, Cessna 904 Whiskey.
Okay, so we're rolling. And now you got to kind of keep your eyes on two things at once here. Keep an eye on that airspeed needle. You can see it climbing. There's 55. We'll gently pull back on the yoke, let it come up off the ground, keep it level. And there's 70. So now use the pitch to try to keep the airspeed around 70 knots. And just follow the runway heading here. Now if you look off to the left, there's a pyramid. That's going to be our Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. And our Science Center is right next to that. And then we'll have the Brown Stadium. So you can see I'm getting a little fast. I can actually come up a little bit more.
Cessna 904 Whiskey, continue for south departure. I will contact you next when you leave my airspace.
So there's a rock hall.
Lakefront Tower, Cessna November 62904 Whiskey, continue for south departure.
And there's the Brown Stadium right there. So we're just gonna kind of steer the airplane around this stadium. Don't really have to worry about traffic. We've got AI traffic on, but we've got it set to easy so we're not gonna crash. Now we got too slow there, so I let the nose come down a little bit. Keep in mind if you steer too steeply, if you make too steep of a bank, the nose will want to come down and you'll lose altitude. So that's one thing to watch out for. We're just going to kind of turn around downtown. I'm going to actually lower my seat so we can see more out the window. There, that tallest building over there is the Key Tower. That's the tallest building that we have. Nobody really cares about that, though. They all care about this one right here, which is the Terminal Tower. And there's our Federal building over there. And now we're going to fly kind of southish. You can see the Cleveland Indian Stadium is right there. Going to be kind of flying past my neighborhood. We're just kind of steer the airplane, like look for the shopping center over here. And if you're curious, I actually live in this kind of wooded area in suburbs over there. And then what I want you to do is just kind of steer the airplane around this industrial part of town here. And then we're gonna head towards the east, Cleveland's east side, the east suburbs. Now again, if you see yourself gaining too much speed, just pitch the nose up. Try to keep it all the way to 70. Once you get to about 3,000 feet, you're going to want to level off. To do that, though, you're going to need to pull the power back. So there's downtown now, way over there. You can see I'm you can see I'm coming up on 3,000 feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the power back, and I'm going to put the needle of the tachometer right in the middle of this green arc here.
You are leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
Now when I do that, the nose of the airplane is going to want to come down.
Lake
So
Bridge
I'm
Tower,
going to need
Cessna,
to
November
pull the
6
yoke back a little
294
bit
Whiskey,
to
frequency
keep the
change.
airplane level. This is where the trim's going to come in handy.
Cleveland approach Cessna November 6 294 Whiskey is type Cessna 152 4 miles
Now
south
as
of
the
Lakefront,
airplane gains speed
3,100
again,
feet.
it's going to want to go nose up. So
Request
now I
clearance
actually have to push the
transition
nose
Bravo
down
airspace.
to stay around 3,000 feet.
Cessna November.
So what I can do
629er,
is I can
4 Whiskey,
adjust that
Cleveland
elevator
approach.
trim and relieve a
Clock
little
1653.
bit of pressure off the yoke so I don't have to keep holding it down. So I'm going to add in a little nose
Squawk
down trim
1653
here
Cessna 904 Whiskey.
while I hold the yoke in.
Cessna 9er, 4 Whiskey,
And then I'm going
radar,
to release the
contact
pressure on the
4
yoke.
miles,
Now I
south
added
of
too much
Lakefront,
because the plane wants to
3,200
descend
feet.
too much. So I'm
Clear
going to pull
through the
back
Bravo airspace.
and add in a little
Clear
nose
through
up
the
trim.
Bravo airspace, Cessna
It's just kind of a
904
balancing
Whiskey.
act. You just want to kind of use the yoke to keep yourself at around 3,000 feet, looking at your altimeter to check, and then use the trim so you don't have to keep pressure on the yoke. Otherwise, your arms are going to get tired. I'm kind of forcing the plane back down to 3,000 feet with the yoke. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of nose down trim. Now, if your airspeed starts getting too fast, you could actually pull the power back. When we get into learning this the proper way, we're actually going to control our altitude with our power, and our airspeed is going to control via pitch, but you don't have to worry about that right now. Try to keep the airspeed in this green arc. Like I said, if it starts getting too high at 3,000 feet, you can pull the power back, but keep in mind when you do that, the plane's going to want to pitch the nose down if you have it trimmed for that way. Now we're just heading out on Cleveland's east side. This is where we're going to do all of our practicing will be east of Burke Lakefront, and that's mostly true in real life. We're not going to fly as far out east as I usually do in real life, but we will be, we're basically heading out to where this waypoint is now, and then we'll turn south to do our practicing. If you want an overview of the area, you can hit the V key and bring up the VFR map. And this is like a little moving map, like a little GPS that will show us where our plane is. And right now, you can move this window and resize it however you want. Right now, our waypoint's over here. But I actually want to make sure I'm heading east first of all. And actually, bear with me here for a second. Okay. I'm just going to turn it a little bit to the left here, so we're headed back up north. Because I did come a little bit too far south. And we can see there's our waypoint here. Which I believe is Imuzi, and I'm climbing, so gotta correct my altitude here. I'm gonna head out over this direction. There's a cool area I want to show you. You may notice too the plane has a little bit of a bank tendency. That's just due to wind and weight and other factors. A lot of planes will have rudder trim or aileron trim. This plane is not so well equipped, so you'll just kind of have to use the ailerons or rudder to keep the plane going straight. This Cuyahoga County Airport is the center for most of the commercial traffic in Cleveland that's not done by airliners. Our big airport was to the west of downtown, which is Cleveland Hopkins Airport. This airport does most of the general aviation traffic and light commercial duties. There's a big company called FlexJet, which is actually headquartered out of Cuyahoga County. You could actually see it. Let's see if I move down. That's Cuyahoga County Airport right there. Sorry about my mouse, it's a little bit fussy. But that's not where we're going. Now, I did kind of grow up right in this area, right? It was actually kind of neat. It's kind of on the localizer for runway 6 years. I grew up right around here. But you can see Cleveland's pretty spread out. There's not really a big urban center. It's one of those cities that's more of urban sprawl. It takes up a wide area. And now you can see I've actually got the airplane trimmed. My hands are off. My hands are completely off. I'm flying hands off. So I'm doing about 100 knots, and I'm doing about 3,000 feet, and it's not really climbing or descending. And so right where I've got this trim at, I'm actually flying hands off. I don't need to really touch the yoke, so that's what you're aiming to get at. We're just kind of drive the airplane around the area. We're just going to continue eastward here to the right of Cuyahoga County Airport. And then you're just going to notice it's just going to be more and more suburbs, and then it's going to get kind of countryish before we take our turn back to the north. You'll notice on this little gauge here, this ball's a little bit off to the right. Normally you want this kind of in the center, and that's one of the reasons why we keep banking to the left here. So you can actually apply a little bit of right rudder to try to keep that ball in the center. So in other words, if I come here and I give it a lot of right rudder, the ball's going to move. And I want it kind of right in the center. Then I'll make it so I don't have to kind of keep so much pressure on the ailerons. That instrument is actually known as the turn coordinator, and we'll use that in our lesson about turns to help us kind of fight adverse yaw. Sometimes this GPS tracking gets switched off. I'm not really sure why. And I know where I want to go is right around this river here, which I think is the Chagrin River, but don't take my word for that. But we're just going to keep going this way and see what we can see. We'll certainly keep an eye out for any vans which may be down by there. I'm actually going to aim for right around here is a cool little spot. I'll show you what I mean. So yeah, pretty nice day for flying, I do have to say. You can go ahead and hit the N key and check out what the area looks like from the sky. Again, using your mouse to zoom and you can even fly the airplane from this view. There's also a drone camera, but I don't want to get into how that works right now. There you can see downtown is way over there. You can see things are just getting greener and greener as we head further out of town. We will fly over a few, or around the area of a few ritzy neighborhoods, but you really can't tell much from the air. Just that if I hit V, actually aim for right here. It's not much to the south. It's pretty rural out there. There's a few colleges, and that will be the way to Columbus when we go there in the future. And I actually can kind of see where I want. I think it's this like little lake here. See these lakes? Just kind of want to head for those. Kent State University is actually to the south as well. And we may do a cross-country or two in that direction. That's kind of a fun little area to navigate through, especially if we're only using pilotage and dead reckoning, like we're not really using the instruments as much, because there's a lot of airspaces and stuff that we'll have to try to avoid, and things just get interesting around there. There's where we're going to wind up. There's IMUZ, which is just a GPS waypoint, and then Lost Nation Airport. But I'm actually going to turn around this lake here. This area that we are coming up on should be what's called the Holden Arboretum, which is a really cool outdoors type of area. Once you get the aircraft trim, by the way, too, you instead of having to constantly adjust it, you can just pull the power back if you get too high. But yeah, this area here is the Holden Arboretum. It's a beautiful nature area. It is a private area, so you have to pay to get into it. But wonderful. But you know, the money goes to the upkeep of the place. It's got wonderful gardens, a lot of activities for the kids, and there's a million hiking trails that you can take and explore. Cleveland has a wonderful park system. You can tell all these trees around here. It's known as the Forest City, and because of all the trees that we have in the area, and there's a lot of like wonderful hikes to be had here. So a lot of people will be like, well, why would you ever pay to go to a nature place? But this is a very special area that's well worth the price of admission. So if you know anybody that's from here, I wouldn't say it's worth coming out to Cleveland just for that by any stretch of imagination. But if you have some extra time, or you're in the area, or you just know somebody that lives here, it's a neat place to check out. This pond right here, I believe, well, the smaller pond's Hourglass Pond. I don't, but we're going to kind of turn around this lake here. I believe there's a boardwalk that actually goes, yeah, you can see Hourglass Pond is, I think, this one right here. And then there's just hiking to be had all throughout here. We're going to kind of turn around this lake. We may or may not use this as a practice site in the future, but we're going to kind of turn around this one and head back north to where we're supposed to be. And that's actually Corning Lake down there. This big lake we're turning around, kind of shaped like, well, it's got an oblong shape. And it's the main lake of the Arboretum, and like I said, plenty of stuff to see and do. Now, I believe it has us set up for Lost Nation, so I'm going to kind of set up this way, and then we're going to do I'll do a touch and go on mine. You don't have to do it on yours, but I'm just going to kind of demonstrate what we're going to do to land. Is I'm going to pull the power back, and then normally we want a descent rate on here of about 500 feet per minute, but you could also just kind of look where you want to be and set the power within, or you're going to use your power to control your altitude and your pitch to control your airspeed. You want your airspeed to be about 60 knots, and your power will control your rate of descent. So I'm going to start slowing up here for landing. So I pull the power back. And now I'm gonna give it some nose up trim. And once I'm within this arc, by the way, I could use flaps. I don't really need to as of right now. This is pretty far out, but I may bring in a notch of flaps here. Now the airplane nose is going to want to pitch up once I do. So I got to kind of hold it down a little bit. By the way, if you're curious too, out this way is Painesville in Pennsylvania. There's actually a nuclear power plant over there. I think it's modeled as like a factory in the game now. So I need to come way down, so I'm going to bring my power back. Now's a good time to bring in my second notch of flaps. Again, I am really far out. But yeah, you can't see I brought them in. You never want to adjust the flaps in a turn. So if you need to turn, wait until you've completed your turn, and then do your flaps. The reason for that is just because we're already flying pretty slow, so we don't have a lot of lift going on, and the flaps can actually slow us down a little bit more. And in a turn, we actually lose a bit of lift, so we can actually get into a stall spin scenario if we play around too much with turning and flaps at the same time. Now what I want is for this runway threshold to be about right here in my windshield. So I'm just going to kind of try to keep it right in the same place on my windshield. You see it's way high up right now. I need to get that lower. See what my descent rate's right at about 500, so that's good. There's a lighting system you can use that'll help your landings, but I don't really need it. We'll get into more as to why you may or may not want to use that later. I'm pretty low, so I'm just going to kind of, again, I'm controlling my altitude with my power, so I'm going low, so I'm going to give it some more power. I want the airspeed right here at about 50 knots, so I actually can pitch up a little bit. We're going to want to track that center line. We're going to want to use ailerons, and when we get closer to the ground, some rudder to keep the airplane on the center line. And again, I'm just controlling my descent with just power alone. Notice I'm not really changing the pitch of the aircraft. The aircraft's kind of doing that on its own. Adding in a little bit of power, taking it out. It takes a lot of practice because you got to predict what the airplane is going to do. You got to kind of get to know the airplane a little bit. So take power out. You're going to really fight for that center line. You don't want to turn too steeply on final approach either because you'll lose altitude. Just take some power out. And I don't want to land on those arrows. I said I'd explain what those mean in a later video, and I promise I will. But once I've got these stripes made, once I know I can pull the power back and still make the runway, you you want to go ahead and do that. You want to go ahead and set the power to idle. I know this thing's going to float for a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to set the power to idle, and I'm going to slowly pull back on the yoke, keeping back pressure and keeping the plane off the runway, but not climb. Keep it off, keep it off, keep it off. Don't climb, keep it off. Eyes down the runway. And then there we go, we landed. And then now I'm going to go full power. I'm going to put my flaps in. We're at 55, so we can take off again. And then we're going to wait to get down to 70. Don't let the trees scare you. And then we're back at 70. So one thing you'll notice I did wrong back there was I put in the power before I put the flaps up. It should have been the other way around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly right down this coastline, and then we're going to turn back towards Burke Lakefront. Now when you climb out, you keep an eye on your airspeed. And I'm going to get past this factory here. And we'll go back home. Not sure what factory that is in the RL, by the way, or if it is a factory. I think there is one out there, but I don't know. It's the nuclear power plant that is east of Lost Station. Is, last I checked, it was modeled as a factory, but this here is not. That would be just a factory or a coal power plant or something. Actually, I don't think it's a power plant. I think it's just some dumb factory. So now we're over Lake Erie. We got 15 miles. Keep an eye on our altitude here. We're at 2,000 feet. You kind of see where track IR would come in handy to kind of move your head around and see what's going on. I'm going to reset the cockpit view. You just kind of want to follow the lake. In the RL, I don't think I can make anything out here, but in the RL on a clear enough day, you can see all the way across Lake Erie into Canada. Like I said, I can't tell if those are buildings way out there, but I don't think there's anything there. We'll go to the external view. Kind of tricky flying the plane from this view because the controls will flip-flop on you. So I haven't readjusted the trim at all from takeoff settings, so you'll see I'm still doing a little bit under 80 knots there, which is fine. This time for me, I'm actually going to level out at 2,500 feet. So right about here, let's level off. We don't need the VSI to do this. We can just look at the altimeter and see what it's doing. But you know what? I can already see my runway from here. And we're going to use the same thing we did before. We're just going to keep that runway threshold on the same spot on the windshield. I think the real 152 you can land without flaps. The way the plane is modeled in the game, and it could be this way in real life. Like I said, I've never actually flown a real 152. This thing just wants to keep going. It will float forever, so I don't recommend trying the landing without flaps. You will want some flap in there for landing. So once I'm at 10 miles out, I can. Well, you know what? I'm already, again, since I didn't change the trim. I'm already kind of trimmed for landing here. But once you're 10 miles out, you'll want to start pulling the power back and pitching the nose up to slow the airplane down and applying trim to kind of keep it wanting to fly. So the trim actually selects the speed that the airplane would prefer to fly at. So you'll want to slow down, you'll need to pull the power back and hold the nose up with the yoke and then add in nose up trim to be able to take pressure off the yoke so the plane naturally wants to fly at 80 knots. We'll get into that later. Again, you don't have to be afraid. We're not, we have crashes off. You can just hit the ground and bounce back up, and if you crash into a building and get stuck, you can always just restart. I mean, it's just a sim. There's Cuyahoga County again off to our right. And one thing I did forget to mention about Cleveland is that we do have a fairly large Polish population, of which I'm a part of. I do have a lot of Polish blood. I thought I'd just throw that out there. I'm going to speed up a little bit just in the interest of time. So now to speed up, I'm pushing the nose down. I'm adding power, pushing the nose down, and applying some nose down trim. So the airplane wants to fly at a faster speed. You never want to fly the airplane with the trim. You always want to make adjustments with the yoke and use the trim to take pressure off. And you can set up as early as you'd like. This is a no fault discovery flight, so you can do whatever you want. Okay, so now there's my runway, so now I am going to start pulling the power back. I'm going to, now see the nose wants to go down, so I'm going to pull the power back, I'm going to hold the nose up, and then I'm going to apply trim so I can let go of the yoke, and the plane will naturally slow down. Go ahead and add in the first notch of flaps. Let's start descending. Now, if you make big changes, you kind of have to help the airplane keep the speed it's supposed to be at. I want to be around 70 knots, so I need to pull back on the yoke and kind of help the plane out a little bit, readjusting the trim if necessary. Now again, I'm just going to keep that same spot on the, I'm just going to keep that runway in kind of the same spot on my windshield. That's really all you got to do. Adjust the power as necessary. If it starts going too high, if the runway starts moving up the windshield too much, you pull the power back. If it moves down, or I'm sorry, if the runway starts moving up the windshield too much, you'd give it more juice. If it starts moving down the windshield too much, you're getting too high, so you pull the power back. Now, it's about, I can add in the second stage of flaps now, so I know that the airplane's going to want to balloon up when I do that, because the flaps are going to give me more lift, so what do? I could hold the airplane, I could force the nose down, but it's easier to just pull the power back, because the airplane is going to want to pitch down naturally, and once it starts going too much, pitching down too much, I can just, bam, add that second stage of flaps, and look, gets it right back where it's supposed to be. Now the flaps will also change the speed that the airplane wants to fly at, because it changes the wing's angle of attack. That's some ground school stuff that I'm not really going to cover in any video, so if you want to know about angle of attack, we'll get into a little bit of stalls and slow flight, but if you really want to know about it, you should check out some of the ground school stuff that I've mentioned before. I'm going to add in a little bit of power. fight for that center line. We want the runway to be right in the middle. We want to know the plane's going to be going down that center line. I'm going to purposely get it a little bit low here because I'm going to let that runway drift up my windshield a little bit because I want to be able to add in that last notch of flaps. Just going to pull the power back and add in that last notch. There we go. Now we're good. Now let's see, our speed is at 60. So I actually want it a little bit slower than that. I'm going to pull the yoke back a little bit and add in a little bit nose up trim, let go and see what happens. Just so, and see if the plane would rather fly at closer to 55 now, which it does, so that's good. Now our stall speed, the plane at which the plane wants to fall out of the sky, will reduce when we add in more flaps. Add some power in, add some power. Add some more. Now you can see those lights to the right of the runway, those white lights, that actually, to maintain the glide slope, you want white and red lights. But we're not going to worry about that in this plane. We're probably not going to worry about that ever. The reason why is because the Cessna's engine out glide path does not follow the glide slope that those lights will give you. So those lights will set you up for a nice landing, but the airplane is not going to want to fly that. Now we've noticed that because we have the settings the way that we have them, the airplane is giving us a little bit of help here. It popped up a glide path thing. So you can follow this, right? So to get inside these boxes, I need to pull the power back. It's saying too fast, so to slow down, I pitch the nose up and I bring the speed back, but I don't like the profile that the game gives you for landings. So I'm just going to kind of ignore this stuff. You could feel free to follow along the advice that it gives you with this helper if you want. This is the only video that we're really going to have. Well, we may have this in a couple other videos, but for the most part, we aren't going to have this helper box here. So kind of keeping that runway in the lower third of my windscreen. And again, when I know I've got those stripes made, I can pull the power back to idle. It may not come to that. I may need to add power to avoid coming up short if I'm too low. See, the runway is drifting up, so I take power out. It's drifting up the windscreen, so I take power out. Kind of want the threshold right here. The other thing is that glide slope too that it gives you will take you to a little bit further down the runway, and it doesn't. I don't think that it takes into account. See, now we've got one white and one red, so we're on the glide slope. But it also doesn't take into account over how long your airplane likes to float when we hold it up off the ground. So I'm reducing power. I'm a little bit low, so I'm going to keep the power in. We need to add power, a little bit low. We've got two red now on the side, which means we're too low. Kind of feathering that throttle until I know I got the stripes made. Coming low too fast, I need to add power, give myself a little boost, and add power. Okay, now I got it made so I can reduce the power to idle. Hold the airplane off, don't let it climb, hold it off, keep pulling back, hold it off, don't let it climb, don't let it climb, don't let it climb, but hold it off, hold it off, hold it off, hold it off. There we go. That little horn's a stall warning horn, which we'll get into a little bit later. But that's it, that's how it's done. So I hope you enjoyed this. Go ahead and put the flaps up. We can follow this line here to turn off. Give it some right rudder. We're going to be coming in like a bat out of hell. It's fine. And we really should hold short there, but we're not going to worry about it today. nobody coming, so we'll go. We'll just assume they gave us clearance. Just in the interest of brevity, we're going to turn right here. And then we're going to taxi back. So, yeah, you guys have to let me know how you did in the comments. If this is all new to you, let me know if this video was any fun or if it was, maybe, I don't know. But this was just a discovery flight, so you can crash as much as you want. We're not really trying to learn anything. We're just trying to get our feet wet as far as the simulator goes. And as I said before, normally the intro flights, I might have mentioned this before, I actually can't remember, but normally the intro flight is the shortest flight that you'll take with an instructor. It'll be, it's typically a half an hour long. It's not even a full hour. But in our case, it was the longest flight. This is going to be one of the longest videos that we have in this entire series because we needed to make sure that we were kind of set up and we were kind of familiar with the sim, had certain buttons mapped and everything else. So the future videos, I probably won't do as much hand-holding as far as button mappings go and that kind of stuff and what you have to need, what you're going to need mapped and everything. I'm just going to kind of let you do your own thing. You'll notice your height kind of resets when you use a quick views too. It's just a quirk of the sim. Again, don't worry about these taxi lights. You can avoid them if you want. They're not there in real life. It's a glitch. They are there in real life. Something real weird's going on at Berkeley Front. There's no signs indicating that this taxiway is closed. So we're going to kind of go down to where this turns. We're going to turn to the left across the dashed line again. This is actually what's known as a controlled area. So once we're on this other side of this line, we'd be out of ATC hands. We didn't do ATC this flight, so we're not going to worry about it. Then we're going to kind of head down in between these two buildings here. Make sure you're not going too fast because it's hard to judge your speed. For some reason they don't have our crew out. I don't know why. And then when you get to this kind of notch, keep coming forward. And then we're going to turn into the second kind of notch here. Right here is fine. And then to shut us down, we're going to kind of, once the engine is idling, I got my feet on the brake still. I'm going to go ahead and pull the parking brake, feet off the brakes, and let's turn off. You want to leave the beacon on as long as the engine's running. We can go ahead and turn off our nav lights now. You can go ahead and pull this mixture lever back. That will kill the engine. Now we can shut the beacon off, turn the ignition off. Turn the alternator off. Then turn the avionics off, and the game will probably end the flight there automatically. Normally we'd have to turn the fuel off and everything else. So hope you enjoyed it. stay tuned. We'll actually learning stuff the proper way. The first video in the series will be straight and level flight. So if you want to get into your ground school stuff, you might want to learn like basic aerodynamics, the full forces of flight, and whatnot. Like I said, the ground school for Flight Simulator 2002 will be a great resource for you. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you tune in for the next video. Should be significantly shorter. We'll just be covering the topics one by one. Until then, thank you for watching. Ciao.